Some forests are famous because people vanish inside them. Hoia Baciu is different. People say the forest follows them out. On the western edge of Cluj-Napoca in Romania, there is a forest that looks ordinary from a distance. A patch of green, a place for walking, a place for cycling. A place where locals take dogs, children, and bicycles on quiet afternoons. But step deeper into Hoia Baciu, and the trees begin to look wrong. Not dead, not broken. Wrong. Their trunks bend sideways before rising. Their roots twist out of the soil like hands that changed their mind. Some trees curve into arches, as if the forest is teaching itself how to make doors. And near the center, there is a clearing. A round, empty space. Grass grows there, but the trees do not. That is the first thing people remember. The second thing is what happens after dark. Visitors have claimed their phones died with full batteries. They have claimed their compasses spun. They have claimed to hear voices just behind them, only to turn around and find nothing but trees. Others speak of nausea, pressure in the chest, a sudden headache, a feeling that someone is standing close enough to breathe on the back of the neck. And then there are the old stories, the ones told before cameras, before ghost tours, before the internet learned the name Hoia Baciu. According to one local legend, the forest was named after a shepherd named Baciu. One day, he walked into the trees with his flock. 200 sheep followed him. None of them came back. Not the shepherd, not the sheep, not even the sound of their bells. But this is not just a story about a missing man, because more than a century later, another man walked into the same forest with a camera. And what he brought back made Hoia Baciu famous around the world. Not a body, not an answer, a photograph. In 1968, a man named Emil Barnea claimed he photographed something above the forest. A bright shape, a disc, a thing hanging over the clearing where the trees refused to grow. After that, Hoia Baciu was no longer just a local place with old rumors. It became a doorway for UFO hunters, for paranormal investigators, for tourists chasing fear, for skeptics trying to prove there was nothing there, and for people who walked in expecting a story, then came out with one of their own. Most haunted forests begin with death. Hoia Baciu begins with absence, a shepherd who never returns, a flock that leaves no trace, a clearing where trees stop at the edge, a photograph that explains nothing. And the strangest part is this: the forest does not need you to believe in ghosts. It only needs you to keep walking. At first, Hoia Baciu was not famous around the world. It was local, a forest west of Cluj-Napoca, a place of bent trees, old stories, and quiet warnings. Some said the name came from a shepherd named Baciu, who vanished with 200 sheep. Others said the name may have come from older local ownership, and that the shepherd story grew around it later. That uncertainty matters, because Hoia Baciu has never had one clean origin. It has versions, and versions are how folklore survives. Before the famous photograph, there was Alexandru Sift. Sift was a biologist. In the 1950s and 1960s, he began returning to the forest again and again, studying strange light phenomena and taking photographs. He did not come back with one clear answer. He came back with an archive. Frames that seemed to show shapes, lights, and forms that were not visible when the shutter was pressed. After his death, much of that archive was reportedly lost or destroyed. Only pieces remained, and those pieces were enough to keep the question alive. Then came August 18th, 1968, a Sunday, a hot summer day, the kind of day no one expects to become part of a legend. Emil Barnea was 45 years old, a technician from Cluj. He had gone into Hoia Baciu with 3 others, not to hunt ghosts, not to search for aliens, but to spend an ordinary day outside the city. The weather was clear, no wind. The temperature was high. They spread out in the clearing. Barnea stepped away to collect sticks for a small fire. Then one of the women called out. She had seen something in the sky. Barnea looked up. Above the trees, he saw a round, flattened object, silvery, bright, moving slowly. Not like a bird, not like a plane, not like anything he expected to see over a quiet Romanian forest. For a moment, he did not photograph it. He stared. That is the detail that makes the scene human, not the object, the hesitation. Then he ran. His camera was on the blanket. He grabbed it and took the first shot in a hurry. The object was still there. He took another. This time, he centered it. Then the thing changed. It began to shine more intensely. It tilted. And then, suddenly, it accelerated upward. Barnea followed it through the viewfinder. He clicked again, then again. 4 photographs in total. And after that, nothing. Only sky, only trees, only 4 people standing in a forest, trying to decide whether the day had really happened. This is where the story could have ended. A strange sighting, a few photographs, a private memory. But Barnea did not keep the images to himself. Eventually, the film was developed. Copies were made. But in communist Romania, a photograph was not just a photograph. Especially not a photograph of something unexplained in the sky. Later accounts say Barnea paid a price for making the images public. He had not photographed a crime. He had not accused the state of anything. He had only pointed a camera upward. And somehow, that was enough to make him dangerous. That detail changes the case. Because now the fear is no longer only inside the forest. It is outside it too. In the office, in the file, in the quiet question no one wanted to answer. What did you see? And why did you tell people? The photographs reached the Romanian press. Then the case moved beyond Cluj, beyond Romania, beyond the forest. Hoia Baciu had been a local mystery. Now it had a picture. And a picture changes a haunting. A story can be dismissed as rumor. A photograph asks to be explained. And in 1968, behind the Iron Curtain, explanation was not always a private matter. Some believed the images showed a UFO. Some believed they showed a mistake, a hoax, or a misidentified object. Skeptics had their theories. Believers had theirs. But Barnea's problem was different. He was not only asking people to look at the sky, he was asking them to admit that something had happened above a Romanian forest that no official explanation could easily contain. That is when Hoia Baciu became something larger than a haunted place. It became a collision. The old fear of the woods, the modern fear of the sky, and the political fear of saying the wrong thing out loud. That is when the stories began to gather around the clearing. People spoke of cameras failing, compasses behaving strangely, lights appearing between the trunks, voices without bodies, hands felt on the shoulder when no one was close enough to touch. And then there was the legend of the child. A 5-year-old girl, according to the story, disappeared during a family picnic in the forest. Searchers found nothing. No shoe, no ribbon, no trace. Years passed. Then, the story says, she came back. Still 5 years old, still wearing the same clothes. No dirt on them, no memory of where she had been. There is no solid record that proves this happened, and that is exactly why the story is dangerous. Because it is not built like evidence. It is built like a wound. A child goes missing. Time passes. The child returns, unchanged. That is not a solved case. That is a violation. The forest has not killed her. It has done something worse. It has refused to obey time. Now imagine hearing that story before entering the clearing. You already know about the shepherd. You already know about Sif's photographs. You already know about Barnea looking up on a hot August afternoon and seeing something above the trees. Then you step into the round, empty space. The trees stop at the edge. The grass lies low under your feet. The sky opens above you. And for the first time, the forest does not feel like a forest. It feels like a room with no ceiling. Your phone is in your hand. The screen lights your palm. The battery drops by 1%, then another. You tell yourself it is nothing. You raise the camera. The lens searches for focus. The trees blur. The clearing sharpens. Then the screen goes black. You press the power button. Nothing. You press it again. Nothing. Then, somewhere behind you, a child laughs. Not loud, not close, just clear enough to be impossible. You turn. There is no child. Only the edge of the clearing. Only the bent trees. Only the path you used to enter. Except now, you cannot remember which path it was. This is the climax of Hoia Baciu. Not a monster, not a scream. Recognition. The moment you realize the forest does not have to attack you. It only has to make you doubt the way out. And if something calls your name from the trees, do not answer. Of course, many people enter Hoia Baciu and experience nothing. They walk, they take pictures, they laugh at the stories. They go home. For them, it is only a forest. But that may be the cruelest part of the legend. Hoia Baciu does not perform for everyone. It waits for the person who brings the right fear. Most retellings of Hoia Baciu end with the same question. Is it haunted? But that may be the least interesting question. A better question is, why this forest became haunted in the first place. The first layer is historical. Hoia Baciu did not become famous from one medieval curse. It became famous in stages. First, there were local stories. A shepherd, a flock, a disappearance with no body and no witness. Then came the researchers. Alexandru Sift returned again and again with a camera, trying to document strange light and magnetic phenomena. Later, Adrian Patruț, a chemistry professor at Boia University, continued studying and writing about the forest's reported anomalies. Then came 1968. Emil Barnea's photographs gave the forest something folklore rarely gets: a date, a witness, a sequence, a public object people could argue over. That is why the Barnea case matters, not because it proves what was in the sky, but because it changed the forest from a local rumor into an international mystery. The second layer is psychological. Hoia Baciu is not terrifying because it is obviously hostile. It is terrifying because it stays almost normal. The paths are real. The city is close. People hike there in daylight. And still, the forest removes just enough certainty. The trees bend. The clearing interrupts the landscape. The stories arrive before you do. By the time something small happens, a dead battery, a strange sound, a sudden feeling of pressure, the mind is already prepared to build a monster. Fear does not always begin with evidence. Sometimes it begins with expectation. The third layer is cultural. Transylvania already lives in the American imagination as a place where old Europe refuses to stay buried. Castles, vampires, dark villages, forests beyond the map. Hoia Baciu fits that imagination perfectly, but it also updates it. This is not just a vampire story. It is a modern haunted place. Old disappearance stories live beside UFO photographs. Folklore stands beside cameras. The shepherd and the flying disc share the same trees. That combination is powerful. It lets the forest belong to 2 centuries at once. The fourth layer is symbolic. The clearing is the image that holds everything together. A circle inside the forest. A space that looks empty but feels marked. Humans are trained to read circles as meaning. A ritual, a wound, a boundary, a door. A path tells you where to go. A clearing asks why it exists. And when a place asks a question for long enough, people begin answering with legends. And then there is the unanswered layer. The part the story refuses to close. What happened to Baciu? What did Sift really capture in those surviving photographs? What did Barnea see before he remembered the camera? Why does the clearing feel less like an empty space than a place where something has been removed? None of these questions has one clean answer. And that is important, because Hoia Baciu does not behave like a puzzle. A puzzle wants to be solved. A legend wants to remain open. That may be why the forest keeps absorbing every version of itself. The shepherd story, the child who returns unchanged, the photographs, the dead batteries, the voices behind the trees. Each one adds a new door, but none of them gives you the way out. There is one detail I keep returning to. The legend of Baciu does not say the shepherd died. It does not say he screamed. It does not say something dragged him away. It only says he vanished. That is colder. Death gives a story an ending. Disappearance leaves the door open. Somewhere in the imagination, Baciu is still walking. The sheep are still following. The bells are still silent. And the forest is still waiting for someone to notice the path has changed. So maybe the question is not whether Hoia Baciu is haunted. Maybe the question is this: when enough people enter a place expecting to meet the unknown, what happens if the place begins to answer?